So dear friends, we are in the month of April, almost middle of the month, and a beautiful month because it's a little hot of course, but then the children have finished their exams and people are at home moving about, perhaps some water shortages in some places, but otherwise things are okay. And so I begin with, first of all, the message for this Sunday. It's a beautiful message which flows from the chapter 24 of Gospel of Luke, what we call the Emmaus experience. Jesus meets his disciples after his resurrection. Rather, he goes across their walk or their journey towards Emmaus. He enters into their conversation, and after he has not only explained to them, met and celebrated the Eucharist with them, and that is the time they recognize. And so today's Gospel, which is 24th chapter, it gives us a beautiful experience of the resurrected Jesus meeting his disciples. I would say that this is one of the moving episodes wherein Jesus doesn't give up on his disciples. They have disappointed him, but he goes after them. It's beautiful to see how Jesus enters into minute things of their life and brings them back again. And so this particular gospel, a longer one, the longer version gives us the whole journey towards Emmaus and their experience such. I was looking out for certain commentaries and I found the best one was the Claretian Bible Diary. Gives a beautiful commentary on this gospel, perhaps with 5 E's, the capital E's. And the 5 E's are very interesting. The first and the most important E is encounter. Encounter with Jesus. The disciples, the encounter with Jesus was a really great thing for them. They were discouraged in their life. They had nothing more to go to. They were disappointed. And this meeting with Jesus perhaps changes the whole thing. One encounter with the risen Lord is enough to sharpen your senses, to quicken your feet, and perhaps give you a new life once again, to make you young again. So that is the meaning of encounter. Just as the disciples encountered Jesus, we have to ask ourselves, have we encountered the Lord? Do we meet the Lord any time? Perhaps during the day, when I meet someone, when I speak to someone, when in the smile of a child, perhaps in the crying of a baby. There are so many ways Jesus comes to meet us. Surely the Bible, the Gospels are the best means to meet him and confront him also, because sometimes we have to ask some questions to Jesus which he will answer. Like the disciples, you have seen what a lot of questions they asked him. How did that Jesus die? Why did he have to suffer? So many questions they had. But this is the result of the encounter. The second E that is spoken of here is Eucharist, or eating with Jesus. As we have seen that Jesus at certain moment, he pretends to go the other way, but the disciples tell him, come and stay with us, Lord. And Jesus not only stays with them, but he celebrates the Eucharist, eating the bread and the food with them. And therefore this eating or this Eucharist is also very important for us. Eucharist is this climax, the height of our spiritual activity. And therefore, as often as we celebrate the Eucharist, as often as we participate the Eucharist, we participate with the Lord in everything that he does. And so it's beautiful that the disciples begin to recognize Jesus in this breaking of the bread. We have the Eucharist. How often perhaps we participate in the Eucharist? Has the Eucharist any meaning for us, or is just a mass that we call a routine, a 15-20 minute exercise, we come and go, our mind is somewhere? Or do we say that perhaps I will meet the Lord in the Eucharist? The third E is explanation that Jesus gives. As I said, we have many questions to ask him. The disciples themselves, how is it that Jesus had to die? How is that Jesus had to suffer? And all these things that we are hearing, that he has disappeared, he has gone. And Jesus explains to them beautifully that every part was important. There was nothing that was accidental in this life. There's nothing accidental that happens in the life of Jesus and the life of the believers. Everything has a meaning. Even perhaps some things which are not so good, my sickness, perhaps my being discouraged, sometimes perhaps even an accident, I would say even a death. Nothing is not, we cannot consider as not meaningful. There is meaning for everything. And Jesus perhaps solves or unfolds the mystery bit by bit in your life. The life of Jesus, the life in the Bible stories, Bible characters are all embedded in us. And therefore, if we believe, we also will live and walk this walk of history along with Jesus, having received explanation for him for many things. For the people who believe, they don't need too many explanations. And for people who don't believe, any amount of explanation cannot convince them. So I would say that perhaps let us take this, that Jesus explains many things in our life. The fourth E is enlightenment. The disciples are enlightened. The disciples are a little more better off now. They are full of joy that they have met they have met resurrected Jesus at the same time, that their problems, their doubts have been resolved, and in the Eucharist they have become a strengthened new persons. So therefore this enlightenment that they get, they see the same things but in a new enlightenment, in a new light. They see the same discouragement, they see their own betrayals, but they know that there is a purpose behind, and the greatest purpose is that Jesus is with them. He will not leave them. I shall be with you till the end of the world, said Jesus. And the last one is Jesus exits, but the disciples continue. You see, the last part of the Emmaus experience or Emmaus encounter, the last part is the disciples go back to Jerusalem. They have walked from Jerusalem to Emmaus. They were going downwards, as it were. It was much more easier, but the opposite way. They had lost all hope, and they had gone back to say that let us go back to the world because Jesus is dead. We know nothing of him. But this whole Emmaus scene changes their perspective, changes their attitude. And now, having been convinced, having been enlightened, now they say that let us go back to Jerusalem. And you can imagine the same night or same evening, they have made such a big journey back to Jerusalem. And this time it is climbing up. They don't mind. They are ready for any type of difficulties, provided they can explain to the others, they can perhaps convince the others that they have met Jesus who is risen. And in order to give this good news, they don't mind from now on going to the ends of the world to proclaim that Jesus is alive. So my dear friends, I leave you at these 5 E's. The first E, as I said, encounter with Jesus, which is very important. Second is Eucharist, or eating with Jesus, which is very important. The third is the explanation that we get for so many of our clarifications that we need, so many of our doubts. Perhaps every day we have something to ask the Lord to explain to him. And he might explain to us not just by word or perhaps by a phone call, by a message, but in some way the events of the day help us to explain many things of life. And we speak of also enlightenment, that the disciples are enlightened, and after Jesus exits from their life, Jesus leaves them alone because he doesn't want to get stuck with them and try to dictate to them everything that to do. Now they have been empowered, they have been enlightened, and they can move on without Jesus, but Jesus is always there, presence of Jesus is always there in their life. And therefore, this is the message for us today, especially the encounter of Jesus in the life of the disciples.